You're now listening to All Hogs Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimson.
A top 25 matchup awaits on the Hill with the Alabama Crimson Tide coming to Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. The second-ranked Alabama Crimson Tide will face off at number 20 Arkansas Razorbacks on October 1st at 2:30 p.m. The game is sold out, so if you didn't get a ticket, you can watch it on CBS, as it's the SEC on CBS Game of the Week. Now, I normally started off with Arkansas's offense, but I'm going to switch it up today in this episode and jump straight into the Alabama offense. The Alabama offense led by Bryce Young. Last season, he torched Arkansas. The 2021 Heisman winner is second in the 2022 Heisman odds right now. He's been having a fantastic season, 1,029 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Alabama moves the ball down the field at a very fast and explosive rate. Against Texas this year on the road, he was 27 out of 39 for 213 yards and 1 touchdown. Something interesting to note, though, that Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South posted on Twitter. He said in the last 5 road starts for Bryce Young, 4 of the games have decided by 3 points or less, and then one of those was the Texas A&M loss. As an athlete, Bryce Young is incredible. He has a high level of accuracy across all levels of the field, and what really sticks out to me when you watch Young is his quick release, which generates a lot of velocity. He's able to get that velocity outside of the pocket on the run, and really that's what makes Bryce Young so special and provides the spark to the Alabama offense. He also throws for a lot of touchdown passes. When they get into the red zone, Alabama will throw the ball a lot. Bryce Young also has good eyes. He's able to see the field well. He uses the space around him in the pocket very smartly. However, there's sometimes, with that velocity and the power he has, he tries to force patches into really tight pockets at time. He has averaging 282.5 passing yards per game. In 2021 against Arkansas, he was 31 out of 40 with 559 yards and 5 touchdowns. Arkansas was also missing Jalen Catalon in that game. Around him, he's got wide receiver Trayshawn Holden, 15 catches for 214 yards and 4 touchdowns. Wide receiver Kobe Prentice, 12 catches for 114 yards. Wide receiver Jermaine Burton, 12 catches, 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. And tight end Cameron Latu, and then also Ja'Cory Brox. Both of those guys have 10 catches on the season. Also in the backfield, Jahmyr Gibbs, 17 catches for 187 yards and 3 touchdowns as the receiving leader. 6 guys with 10-plus catches. Watch for Gibbs getting a lot of dump-offs in the backfield, running some routes. Additionally, Alabama just really spreads the ball around and has been able to replace their talent last season like Jamison Williams. With Alabama, you see early on, they don't really have like that stud wide receiver, but going in later into the season, they're likely going to develop that. We've seen it the last few years. The way that Nick Saban has utilized wide receivers and gotten them into the NFL is at an incredible, successful level, and expect none other from a wide receiver unit under Saban with this 2022 team. Now, the offensive line for the Tide, obviously very good, 5 upper 4-star talent. However, this season they do replace both tackles. Evan Neal notably got drafted into the NFL, and they also replaced their center. So 3 out of 5 of the guys left, and then only 2 returning starters. Left tackle Tyler Steen will get the start for Bama. Left guard Kendall Randolph. Center Darian Dalcourt. Right guard Emil Ekiyor Jr. And then right tackle J.C. Latham. This Alabama offensive line has only allowed 4 sacks in 4 games. Texas, though, did a good job of throwing some different looks to create some pressure up against Bryce Young. As you saw, Young's stat line wasn't that impressive against Texas. And then team averaging 7.3 yards attempts on the ground. That's a lot. New to the offensive line up front. And their running backs. Jace McKellen, 24 attempts for 245 yards. That's good for 8.4 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns as well. Gibbs, like I said, getting involved in the passing game. He's also got 25 carries for 172 yards. Some other running backs getting involved, Miller, Williams, both of those guys with over 10 attempts. They use a lot of running back talent, averaging 235 yards rushing per game as a team. 48.3 points per game. Expect none other than an elite offense coached under Bill O'Brien, likely one of the guys headed off to get a head coaching job somewhere in the G5 or Power 5. This offseason, Alabama recruits at such a high level that their offense is always going to be very impressive. They did lose a number of guys in the offensive line, and I'll talk about that later, but Arkansas throwing some different blitz packages and such to force Bryce Young to be a little more uncomfortable will be key for this game, and Arkansas secondary obviously still having some of the issues, but getting Miles Slusher back will be beneficial for the Hogs defense. Now, speaking of that Arkansas defense, the defensive line up front has been very impressive. 99.3 rushing yards allowed per game with 20 sacks. Leading the way in terms of defensive linemen, Jordan Dominic, edge rusher, with 4.5 sacks. Zach Williams on the edge with 3 sacks. Landon Jackson with 2.5 sacks. A number of other guys good in the run and pass rush game. Eric Gregory, Jashad Stewart. He was back against Texas A&M after missing the Mo State game. Terry Hampton, Cam Ball, and Isaiah Nichols. Arkansas has 8 defensive linemen that they constantly rotate during the game, and all of these guys are solid playmakers, which is awesome to have. This is what Barry Odom's 3-2-6, 4-2-5 scheme has needed for the last few years, and Arkansas really struggled up front, and now they have it. And the secondary doesn't really receive all of the benefits because at times they do let up some coverages, but if Arkansas had a bad defensive line and a bad secondary, I think the pass defense would be even worse than it is now. But the guys up front, pass rush and run rush, are doing their job. Additionally, Drew Sanders, an outside linebacker and edge rusher with 5.5 sacks. Him and Jordan Dominic have combined for 9 of Arkansas's team total 20 sacks. Like I said, against a Bama offensive line that only returns 2 starters, Arkansas has to throw in a number of different looks with their 5 or 6 guys, whoever's playing out there at linebacker, probably Bumper, Drew, and then 3 or 4 guys up front. Arkansas will probably be playing a lot of 4-man defensive lines because of how talented and better the defensive line is than any other position group out there right now. The defensive line has been getting its job done week in and week out. There's not much you can criticize there. The new defensive line coach has done a fantastic job. Deke Adams has his guys playing really good ball, and for what was a concern for a lot of Arkansas fans before the season, it's the position group, I think you can argue, besides offensive line, that I'm really confident in. The linebacker core for Arkansas will stay the same. Drew Sanders, he's just going to do his thing, man. Hit hard, run all over the field, get those tackles. 31 total tackles, 14 solo, comes off the edge as well. Sanders, a fantastic athlete, played for the Crimson Tide the last few seasons as a reserve player. Overall, though, Arkansas, their linebackers, I think, have to be better when they drop back in pass coverage. That goes for Bumper Pool, 36 total tackles. Chris Paul as well. When Arkansas drops her linebackers back, they've got to be better in pass protection. And I think Grant Morgan last season really spoiled us. I mean, he was fantastic in pass coverage. Arkansas really won't get a linebacker that good, but I imagine that's something they're going to work on. As it during A&M it happened here and there, and it's okay to not have your linebackers always in pass protection. I don't think there's going to be a lot of situations where Arkansas has to drop linebackers into pass pro just based off of how the defensive line is constantly getting pressure and Arkansas having a spy on Young at times and so forth. I really wouldn't expect to see it too much in this game, and it's not a concern of mine. Now, the dreaded talk each week comes to the Arkansas secondary, and I feel like I've repeated myself since the first game. The Arkansas secondary is what it is. Jalen Catalon out for the season, and Arkansas's depth, just based off of the guys that were recruited before Sam Pittman, Barry Odom took over. And when a guy gets injured, you got to be able to have that next man up mentality. Arkansas pass defense has let up 302.5 average passing yards per game, team giving up 401.8 yards as a defense as well, 26 points per game compared to that high number total. The secondary obviously being an issue. For corners, I think you'll see Dwight McLaughlin. He's our number one guy. He's got 2 interceptions on the year. He's done fantastic in some shorter coverages, but when some wide receivers get really quick with their feet and such down the field, sometimes he gets tricked up, but that's where the safeties come into play and are expected to help out. I mean, you can't hold one-on-one man coverage on the weak side of the field all the time. Also, cornerback Hudson Clark. Hudson gets a lot of, I think, criticism that really isn't warranted. Hudson has been good in coverage this year. There's not been a lot of times where Hudson has let up that many catches at all. He's held his part. Being a little bit bigger corner, 6'1", kind of helps him out too. Malik Chavis did jump him on the depth chart, but I do think you'll see a good amount of Clark because I believe Chavis is one of those guys that Arkansas needs to have on this field when they have their best 5 or 6 guys out there in the secondary. So you'll see Malik Chavis playing some corner and then also some safety work as well. Against A&M, Miles Slusher made his impact known out there on the field. You can argue that he was one of Arkansas's best defensive players in that game for sure. Getting him back at nickelback is huge to Odom and the scheming that he does on defense. You can argue he's our best defensive back easily. 6 total tackles against A&M, 1 pass deflection, and coverage. He was fantastic in the slot, covering in different nickel packages, mainly some dime packages, as well as Arkansas sometimes pulls 6 defensive backs out there. I thought he did a fantastic job and really showed his presence out there on the football field, making it known after his injury. And cornerback Ladarius Bishop is out for the season, so another piece of depth hurt for Arkansas. Look for Kari Johnson at corner to step up in place of him. Safeties for Arkansas, safety Latavius Brini, safety Simeon Blair, and then also Jaden Johnson. Those guys are kind of struggling to, really put in place what Jalen Catalon brought to the team, and that's understandable, Catalon being an All-American, but the safeties have to perform better in their zone assignments, their coverages. It's common in college football for that to be a lot harder of a thing to pick up on, and that's why offenses are a lot better, and then defenses, when you comparing to the NFL defenses in college, are not on that same level just based off of assignments, tackling, things like that. Arkansas overall, though, defense has to tackle better than they did against A&M. There was a decent amount of missed tackles. Can't be letting up big plays like 2nd and 30s. When the defensive line is putting that pressure up front, the secondary has to hold their own. I mean, when the defensive line is helping that much and then the secondary is hopeless, it's very frustrating to watch. Expectations for the secondary can be various. If Arkansas can hold Young to under 350 yards, that'd be fantastic. But that feels like a very tall task given Young last season against Arkansas and then the secondary this season. Arkansas secondary, I think, will improve better week by week, and we may see a bigger jump in the bye week. Just learning to work with a playbook and learning to deal with the personnel that has been established so far. Hopping into the Arkansas offense preview. KJ Jefferson has 941 passing yards on the season with a great 8-to-1 touchdown-to-interception ratio. He's 69.1% completion percentage on the season as well, being an accurate passer. On the ground, he's had 64 rushing attempts, a couple of those being sacks in certain situations. 279 yards total on the ground with 4 touchdowns. Something that KJ and the Arkansas offense has to bring against Bama that they did last season really well against a Pete Golding-led Alabama defense was the long ball. Saw a little bit against Mo State in the comeback late in the fourth quarter, but KJ is very talented. He drops a very good deep ball and throws into good situations down the field. If Arkansas can incorporate that back into the offense, I think you're really talking here because Arkansas is going to have to score 20, 30 plus to beat Alabama given the defense. It's a new week, though. I still see a lot of people talking about the one play with KJ and him jumping really early, trying to make the Superman dive, and it's one play. I'm sure going forward, put in a similar situation, KJ would not do that. It sucks that it happened, but you got to move it in the past, and I'm sure KJ has already done that way before any of the fans did. Lots of quarterback draw reads are going to be drawn up on the playbook, so for him, seeing the field, making smart decisions, using his body, explosive runs down the field as well. KJ's always able to make difficult throws on the run, and something that I also was talking about with the quarterback draws is getting some yards after contact. KJ getting his passes accurate, short to mid-range is important. Really anything new we haven't seen from him. We just have to be able to utilize his talent, and that's where I think the long ball has to come into play here if Arkansas wants to pull the upset off. Working with KJ is wide receiver Jaden Hazelwood, 18 catches for 214 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, lining up in the slot, he's seen a lot of shorter to mid-range across the field, converting, getting first downs. So for him to get involved in the passing game that way and keep the chains moving will be important. Wide receiver Matt Landers, I think he's more of your outside and downfield threat. Saw him have a really nice throw to him in the South Carolina game that he dropped, and then he responded really well with a most state performance. If we can get that type of performance out of him that we saw in the most state game, that'd be very positive. 15 catches for 230 yards, leader in receiving yards for the team. Tight end Trey Knox, 11 catches for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver Warren Thompson has 8 catches for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. You'll see Rocket Sanders and whatever running back is also in the game involved in the passing options. Arkansas running the RPO offense, obviously going to run the ball well over 60% of the time, but the passing options there, especially to move it on 2nd and long, 3rd and long, get across the field, Hazelwood, Landers, those guys will come in very important. The Arkansas offensive line has been very solid this season, only 5 sacks allowed for 38 yards. They looked good last season, and it also does help the sack number with KJ scrambling, getting out of the pocket, but they've done really good on getting him time. Left tackle, though, Luke Jones, Latham, Stromberg, Limmer, and Wagner going left to right there have all been fantastic, and then Crawford and St. John being the 6th and 7th guys to rotate in and out when needed. Arkansas's offensive line has really bolstered the offense and given Kevin Browse a lot of different options to work with. Now, the rushing attack for Arkansas is a fantastic scheme. Now, Rocket Sanders did kind of get eyed out against A&M. He still has 83 attempts for 508 yards and 3 touchdowns, despite only averaging around 4 yards per carry against A&M. KJ on the season, 4 touchdowns, 4.3 average yards per attempt, but that's including some sacks in there too, as sacks are counted as rushing losses in college football. AJ Green, another option in the backfields at the second most yards at the running back position. And someone I think we'll see a lot more is Rashad Dumian. He's very explosive. Arkansas has to find a way to get him more touches. I feel like when we get the ball to him, he's running down the field, making good decisions with his eyes. Getting him 5 or 6 touches against Alabama here, I wouldn't be shocked to see that. And then Dominic Johnson returned against A&M. He looked good, 5 catches for 32 yards. You don't want to push that injury back, but getting him involved in the running scheme here would be beneficial. With the RPO-based offense, the passing threat has to emerge. Rushing a lot of counter zones, and anything Arkansas does and makes mistakes on offense, penalties are going to be so costly. They're always costly, but when you play Bama, one mistake can mean so much more as they just take advantage of it so well, and that's why Arkansas has to handle the ball well. Ideally, no fumbles, no interceptions, win the turnover battle with the defense. Arkansas also, I don't think we should see any trick plays with Malik Hornsby. I think Alabama will be ready for those, as they're one of the most talented teams with a lot of good scheming. Arkansas has to score 30-plus to beat Bama, in my opinion. Now, this Alabama defense is elite. 7.3 points per game. Rushing yards allowed 62.5 per game. The front seven is so good for Alabama. Nose tackle DJ Dale, a senior, 4-year player, his absolute stopper in the middle of the field. On the edge rush, Bryce Young and Tim Smith creating a lot of pressure up front. The thing with this defensive line under Saban, his defensive philosophy, is these guys are very athletic, very movable, all very high talent, 4- or 5-star recruits. These guys can get around and move around offensive line. And with Saban running a 4-linebacker crew, 2 outside linebackers and 2 inside linebackers, you'll see a lot of Will Anderson. Will Anderson, in my opinion, was the best player in college football last season, despite not winning the Heisman. 17.5 sacks in a single season. He's an incredible pass rusher. He's got 4.5 sacks on this season and really hasn't even looked his best. Alabama, P. Golding continuing to scheme around Will Anderson, and he just makes right and left tackles just look so foolish. Arkansas has to hold back Will Anderson and limit him to a sack or maybe even less to avoid pressure up front. Dallas Turner had 8.5 sacks last season, and he didn't even play that many snaps. He's been fantastic for the Tide this season, creating pressure. Chris Baswell as well for the Tide, the reserve outside linebacker. Saban will scheme a lot around those outside linebackers, though, as we've seen in previous seasons. Henry To'oTo'o has been a leader for this Alabama defense, opted to come back this season, plays both spots inside. He has 33 total tackles on the season. Jalen Moody as well, 25 total tackles at inside linebacker. Both of these guys can tackle, wrap up really well, and they're very good in pass coverages as well. This front seven Alabama has very talented, combined for 12 sacks and can wreak havoc versus the run, and they make things easy for the Alabama secondary. At cornerback for Alabama is 2 young guys, one of those being Kool-Aid McKinstry. Kool-Aid McKinstry versus Bumper Pool, maybe the name battle of the century for Arkansas versus Alabama. McKinstry, former 5-star center. He's a starter this season after playing some reserve last season, getting some starts as well. He's an incredible athlete, playing AAU basketball as well. He's got really good feet. Footwork is incredible. He's got good hands. His on-ball talent is very impressive. Opposite to him is a 5-star as well. Terrion Arnold didn't play at all last season, but looked really good during camp. A redshirt freshman getting the start there. Safety is a lot more experienced. Jordan Battle, star of the secondary, passing on the NFL draft. He's got 14 total tackles on the season. DeMarco Helms was also eligible for the NFL draft, but opted to return to Alabama. He's second on the team with 21 total tackles. He had a very good game against Texas. He was 5th in interceptions last season, 3rd in pass deflections in the Southeastern Conference. And with those 2 safeties, 2 corners, Bama and Pete Golding have what they call a star player, and you'll see a lot of Brian Branch, 3rd in the team in total tackles, veteran player. Same thing with Malachi Moore. He was a 3rd-team All-American named by Pro Football Focus. Very talented defense. When you have guys like Malachi Moore not even starting in your secondary, I think that shows how deep the safety depth truly is for the Tide. Year in and year out, the Crimson Tide have an elite defense. This year is none other than that. Now, the special teams for Alabama performed really well in their win over Louisiana Monroe. They got 2 touchdowns, but obviously it's ULM. For field goal, their kicker, Will Reichard, perfect 25 for 25 on extra points, 100% on field goals as well, with a long field goal of 52 yards. Their punter, James Burnap, also their holder. He has 9 punts over 4 games, 42.7 average yards per punt. He had 6 punts versus Texas, so that kind of gives an idea of how Texas was able to get some stops against a really good Alabama offense. Punt returner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, like I said, very fast, very talented, got good ball skills. really able to pressure the opposing wide receiver, which makes for a good punt returner. Kick returner, Ja'Cory Brooks. The thing with the Alabama special teams is their reserve players all play on special teams. Same thing with the other team, but Alabama's reserve players are different than anyone else's reserve players. They have so many talented athletes that they use them for punt return, kick return, and their special teams make a lot of talented plays. And when you have 5 and 4 stars lining up, obviously tackling is going to be a lot better. Arkansas's special teams has gone a far way and has recruited kind of out of the chronic issues that they had on punt returns and kick returns. However, Alabama special teams is going to be better just based off of a depth perspective. Cam Little did have that kick against A&M that didn't go and bounced off the top. But like Sam Pittman said, Cam Little has won us games, and he will win us games in the future. I'm not too worried about him. He will put the work in. He's 18 out of 18 on extra points, 2 out of 4 from field goals. Hasn't hit from past 39 yards this season. I'm confident he'll bounce back, though. I'm not really too worried about his performances or anything. Max Fletcher has 18 punts on the season, 37.2 average yards per punt. He's had 8 of them within the 20 and 5.5% of them being touchbacks, which is really good, kicking it not in the end zone. Bryce Stevens at punt returner had that electric yard carry back against Most State, 82 yards, my bad. And then A.J. Green at kick returner. Arkansas on special teams, they just have to execute, do their thing, doesn't have to make it too complicated. Some other notes right now on Tuesday, the line sits at Arkansas plus 17.5. Arkansas at a plus 600 money line as well with an over-under of 61. Alabama has won 14 games in a row, and Nick Saban has not lost to the Arkansas Razorbacks. Alabama is 22-8 all-time against Arkansas, and before this Tide won those 14 in a row, is actually 8-8, so that puts in perspective how dominant the Alabama Crimson Tide have been against the Arkansas Razorbacks recently.
It's time for Sam's prediction.
I've got Arkansas dropping this game to the Alabama Crimson Tide 37-24, but I do believe Arkansas makes the cover in this game. The Arkansas defense is not in a position right now that they're able to hold Alabama to less points that the offense can score. I know that sounds very just simple to say as it's the basics of scoring, but right now Arkansas has to compete and continue to carry momentum throughout the game. I do think this will be a game at halftime. I'm confident in that. I think Arkansas will fight. At the end of the day, I think Alabama pulls through, but I do have hope. Some things that Arkansas has to do if they want to win this game. Arkansas has to force penalties. And one thing that Arkansas can do to force penalties isn't with the 11 players on the field. It's with the 70,000-plus Razorbacks fans in the stands. Arkansas, that stadium has to be loud. That stadium has to be packed, and it will be. And if Arkansas can use the red out, all the fans coming together, 50,000 pom-poms in the stadium, make noise, cause commotion, and get Alabama to make mistakes, that'll be very beneficial. Saban's program had a high of the most amount of penalties ever under Nick Saban in Alabama at Texas. Arkansas has to create a crazy atmosphere for the Tide coming into town. Also, Arkansas has to use KJ to his advantage. The long ball, like I was talking about earlier, smart QB draws. The offense has to, utilize the RPO scheming. Explosiveness is key, though, for both sides. Utilize it on offense and limit it for Alabama. Arkansas has to keep the momentum, too. They can't, go up 7-0, 10-0, and then have a fumble and have Alabama, march down the field. And especially on the plays that are like 2nd and 30. Arkansas gave up 2nd and 30s against Texas A&M, had the fumble, and Arkansas only lost by 2. And at the end of the day, if Cam Little's kick was a couple more inches to the left, Arkansas would have won that game, and maybe the concerns wouldn't have been as large as they seem out to be just because of the loss. at the end of the day, Arkansas is a really talented football team. And then it's very good that I sit here and I talk about Arkansas has a chance to play with Alabama. I mean, a couple years ago, Alabama coming to town would mean Alabama's favored by 35, and Arkansas is going to be lucky to even score a field goal in the second half. Arkansas is in a position where the fans care a lot about the program, and a loss versus a team like Texas A&M it does suck. Don't get it wrong. I mean, it was a bad loss, but we're in the position right now that Arkansas is a talented football program, and Alabama coming to town, all the excitement is so awesome to see. Now, I will have a recap of this game up Monday, so stay tuned for that one. Apologies if my voice is a little off. I've been dealing with some allergies up here, with the weather turning. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. Lots of good information in this one. If you did, please share it. It would make my day. Signing off for now, though. Woo Pig Suey.
That's all for today's episode of All Hogs Sports with Sam Stimson. Make sure to stay tuned for the next episode covering all Arkansas Razorback sports. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media too. On Twitter and Instagram at All Hogs Sports Pod. Like on Facebook at All Hogs Sports and Arkansas Razorbacks Podcast. And on YouTube at that same name. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Go Hogs!